10 May 1945, Leipzig. In a frayed school notebook, a German civilian named Karl Brenner writes a single line he will never show another soul. "We will not be judged by what we did, but by what we can prove we forgot." He closes the book and puts it under the loose plank beneath his bed. He will not speak the line at work. He will not say it at the ration queue. He will not say it at the ration queue. He will not say it to his mother or to Pastor Koch, who has begun preaching about guilt in the evenings. He will not say it to the military government officer who comes to the door asking for names. He will not say it to himself again for 10 years. He will live by it. Leipzig in May is a geography of absence. Streets without roofs, bedrooms open to the sky, walls standing alone, holding no weight but the memory of it. The sound of rubble buckets scraping concrete is the metronome of the city. There are children picking through ash for nails. There are women with scarves knotted under chins, passing bricks in lines. Trimmerfrauen, their arms and backs inventing a new industry out of the void. The men who might have done it are gone. Dead. Unaccounted for. In camps to the east. In the west on roads leading nowhere. In the belly of the war, still. Allied occupation orders are posted in block letters on walls still standing. Curfew at 9 p.m. No weapons, no gatherings. Surrender all radios unless registered. Report immediately any war criminals. The orders are not negotiated. They are read and memorized in whispers. The arithmetic of the first weeks is simple and brutal. One room becomes 3 rooms with blankets hung on twine to create corners. One loaf of bread becomes 4 meals if you cut thinner slices. One day becomes possible if you find 1 potato on the way home from the distribution center. The mathematics of survival is measured in calories and compromises. The Allied authorities call it relief. The United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation. Administration ships flour in brown sacks that smell like a word that does not exist yet in German. In the evenings, a few lanterns shine behind blackout curtains no one has bothered to take down. They are held with tax and superstition. In this light, Karl writes lists. A ledger of the missing. Father, Hamburg in February, no letter since. Brother Hans, last seen in March, east of Frankfurt, under Oder. Uncle Otto enlisted 1943, no word. Fräulein Ankie B. evacuated from Bommelstrasse during the winter, rumor she is in Bavaria. He is 22. He is a clerk because he was too thin for the front, too useful with numbers, too lucky and too unlucky in the same breath. His mother trades a porcelain figurine of a shepherdess for 4 eggs and a half kilo of brown bread. She calls it rescuing calories from the past. The man who gives her the egg says he is a neighbor of a farmer. He says he has cousins. He says different things with each trade. His jacket has American cigarettes in the lining. Lucky strikes, he murmurs as he counts the notes. Currency is a concept. Cigarettes are real. In one Allied intelligence summary for the region, compiled in July 1945, an anonymous officer writes in clipped prose that the cigarette has displaced the Reichsmark as unit of value in Leipzig, with prices varying daily according to currency influx and weather. The bureaucratic voice is clinical and correct. When the Americans drive through the city in jeeps, people look and then pretend not to look. The American helmets give way to Soviet caps and back again in other districts and then to uniforms of the British in the northwest. The borders move, the soldiers do not. The new rulers change with handshakes far away in places no one in the rubble has ever seen. The Allied occupation government has acronyms: OMGUS in the American zone, SMADUS in the American zone, SMAD in the Soviet. The British have their own. The French too. The acronyms sound like nicknames for strangers. The rules are the same. This is a supervised piece. In June, a list is posted at Carl's office. Every adult must complete a questionnaire. The document has an honest, bureaucratic name and a history yet to be written, the Fragbogen. It is dense. It has more than 100 questions about past affiliations, contributions, donations, voting, friendships. It asks if you have ever been a member of the NSDAP. It asks if you have ever given money to the SA, SS, or any party organ. It asks about your reading habits. It asks for names. It is printed on ration-thin paper. It is handed out in strict order and collected with stern faces. The mathematics of the new order is biographical. He sits with the questions like an exam that will decide how much food he can eat. He writes that he was in the Hitler Youth because everyone was. He writes that he attended rallies but did not cheer. He writes that he worked in a factory making screws. He does not write that those screws were stamped into ammunition casings. He does not write that he trained 1 week with the Volkssturm, was issued a rifle without a bolt, and sent home by a superior who said, "You'll be more useful alive and invisible." He does not write that he took the uniform home and burned it in a stove that otherwise had no coal. He does not write how relieved he was to find that wool burns slowly. The Spruchkammer, the denazification court, is an invention of necessity and idealism and exhaustion. In the US, zone, it becomes a system with categories and processes that feel like justice until you count. In the British zone, it is more administrative, less dramatic. In the Soviet zone, it is decisive, ideological, and often final. In Leipzig, the paperwork is handled in rooms where the ceiling leaks. There are categories, printed and taught: Hauptschuldig, major offenders; Belastete, offenders; major offenders; Mithilfe, followers; followers, followers, followers; follow, followers, follower. The words are elegant in their gradations and cold in their consequences. They slide past responsibility like a ruler past an open wound. He stands in a corridor with 100 others waiting to hear what he is. Mithilfe, the woman at the desk says, stamping his file hard enough to shake the table. There is no triumph in her voice. There is paperwork. There is a ration card. There is the new status that allows him to return to his desk. He watches a man with a silver signet ring leave the room with more stamps on his documents than there is space for purple. He watches a woman leave with none. She goes out a door that is watched by 2 men in uniforms with armbands that are neither red nor black. The mathematics of guilt is not distributive. It is not proportional. It is not meant to be. The Allied intelligence summaries, those daily and weekly reports typed in New York grammar on German realities, begin to note a trend by autumn 1945. Hunger is decisive in shaping political opinion. Survey after survey shows that Nazi ideology is marked down in the minds of many as a bad idea badly executed, and that the word guilt is used more in church than in street conversations. A 1946 occupation report from the American zone cites public opinion. Bombings are remembered in detail. The existence of camps is often questioned or rationalized. Knowledge of mass murder is admitted only under pressure, if at all. The same report notes that German labor is skilled, that it is disciplined. That industry, if fed coal and steel, will multiply output. To those who read these statistics in Washington, they look like opportunity. To those reading them in Leipzig, if anyone reads them at all, they would look like a second, quieter conquest. The first winter is cold. The second winter is hungrier. The hunger winter of 1946–47 will enter German folklore and remain in bones. Coal is short. The joke in the street is a black paper poster of the Kohlenklau, the coal thief, with long fingers stealing lumps from bins. It is a joke with teeth. If you have a bicycle, you ride it to a mine and beg. If you have a cart, you drag wood out of parks. If you have none, you pull beams from ruins and burn bright painted lacquer with a smell like funerals. The arithmetic of heat is primal. In Leipzig, under British administrators for a time, children receive supplemental rations if their mothers can produce a certificate from a doctor declaring them underweight. The queue lines are long. Official caloric allotments hover at numbers that are printed and believed because there is no alternative, 1,000 calories per day in some months. Kitchens are arithmetic classrooms where survival is divided among plates. On Sundays, the American newsreels play in makeshift cinemas and show the liberation of camps. The reel's narrator speaks English. The German interpreter's voice is quiet. In one shot, a child sits with a striped cloth too big for her on a cot that is too short. People leave the screenings early. "We saw," one woman writes in a 1947 diary entry archived in a local museum, "but it felt like something that happened on the moon. And yet the smell of the moon was in our town last year." Her handwriting slants left. Outside Leipzig, in places like Buchenwald near Weimar, Dachau near Munich, Bergen-Belsen near Celle, the Allied occupation runs a different kind of camp. Displaced persons, DPs they are called, Jews who survived, forced laborers who were shipped to Germany, Soviet POWs, Poles, Balts, Roma, people without a home to return to, or with a home occupied by others. The DP camps exist in parallel with German life, like adjacent universes with fences. On the road to work, Karl passes a column of men in coats walking near a fence topped with wire. He does not look long. He reads the small signs in English, UNRRA. He hears the singing on certain nights and recognizes none of the words. He hears languages that sound like prayers and like anger. He hears names that are lists of the dead, called out and answered with the silence of all lists. Once, in early 1946, he is assigned, as a temporary duty, to help inventory a school building requisitioned by the military government. His room has crates marked Feldafing and Landsberg. A British corporal asks him to count spool lengths of telephone wire, light bulbs, pencils. The corporal smokes and writes in a notebook with a certain relief and weariness. "The injustice of the thing is that papers do not burn," he says to no one in particular. The corporal does not ask for Karl's opinion of the camps or their inhabitants. He does not tell him that the new world being built would require both of them to live next to ghosts. He does not need to. The room smells like old chalk and tobacco and a civilization making lists. In the east of the broken country, trains begin arriving from Silesia, Pomerania, the Sudetenland. They have families in them and furniture tied with rope and animals if there was space. 12 million people will move west, by order, by force, by fear, by train and by foot. In some places, the expulsions are called by their German word, Vertreibung. In others, they are unnamed. The new arrivals are called Flüchtlinge when pity is available, and worse names when it is not. They arrive with documents, with letters, with keys to houses they will never enter again. They arrive with war still behind their eyes. Leipzig, like every other city in the zones, receives orders to house them. There is an equation for this written in directives and enforced by police who pretend to be polite when the paper demands it. The mathematics of rooms is rigid, so many square meters per person. Children above a certain age count as units. Curtains do not count as walls. Kitchens do not count as rooms. Karl is assigned to the housing office in 1946. He stores the ledger under the desk because there is not enough shelf for its size. He has a ruler, he has a pencil, he has the respect that comes from being the one who says yes and no official. The first family he places is a bookbinder from Königsberg with a wife and 2 daughters. They are given a room in a second-floor apartment where a widow and her son already live. The widow cries into a cloth when the keys change hands. The son waits in the hallway and pretends to be stone. What happens at the threshold between the newcomer and the native is not history yet. It is behavior. There is a limit to how many times you can boil a bone before it lets go of its last taste. There is a limit to how many times you can be told your suffering is less than someone else's before you decide to measure. The arithmetic of scarcity has many variables. In a later occupation report, an American officer writes that friction between evacuees and locals is increasing due to congestion and food shortages. Children are particularly affected by fights over petty items. The officer spells evacuees as if everyone left by choice. There are whispers from the DP camps and from corners of factory yards. Names of nearby killing grounds get spoken aloud and then swallowed. In Leipzig, a tailor's wife says to Karl, "We didn't know," and then adds under her breath, "Now we do," as if the second sentence absolves the first. A rumor spreads that a former SA man has been arrested. Another rumor that he has been released after 3 days. The Spruchkammer decisions make their way through rumor faster than the posted lists. He was a follower, people say. He just joined to keep his job. He did not shoot. He did not sign. He signed but did not read. The vocabulary of the new era is precision, and it is imprecision. It is measured mercy. The numbers of the denazification process start to pile up in the Bundesarchiv in places like Koblenz and Berlin and in state archives. Millions of questionnaires, hundreds of thousands of hearings. The categories do their work. The camps built for concentration become camps for detention of suspected major offenders. Trials at Nuremberg set a tone that is too large and too far to be a part of the street, but it bleeds into conversation in fragments. They hung him. He said he did not know. They showed films. The mathematics of guilt is imperfect on purpose. The system needs stability more than justice. Those who say this aloud are not invited to meetings in the evening. Those who shrug and return to their desks are promoted when there is a job to be done, a paper to sign, a parcel to inventory. The black market has a smell. It smells like coffee that is not coffee, and tobacco that is American. At the Zoologische Garten in Berlin, at the Hauptbahnhof in Leipzig, at the Ostbahnhof in Frankfurt, the market is a human equation thrown onto the floor. 1 scarf for 2 cigarettes, 1 coil of copper wire for half a kilo of lard. 1 story told in sadness for a soup extra ladled. The police try to enforce legality. The law is a new coat over old clothes. People trade in shadows anyway. You must look straight ahead when they search your bag, a woman tells her friend in the queue. They look for shoulders that ease. He keeps going to work. He keeps measuring rooms. He keeps concluding that the arithmetic will not add up, but that the numbers must still be written. The war did not teach him to love rules, but it taught him to survive them. When the new democracy arrives as an idea on paper, he recognizes it first as a writing style. The American occupation authorities publish pamphlets about rights and responsibilities, about local councils. They require new elections and outlaw old parties. They make newspapers pay for paper with hard currency. They license some editors and forbid others. They invite teachers to be trained in new methods with old chalk. They show the citizens how to disagree in public without being arrested, with a limit written in ink. These are techniques. They are moral too, but moral like a column of numbers, additive, balanced if done correctly. The first signs of something like prosperity do not arrive as cash. They arrive as crates. In 1947, a warehouse near Leipzig is designated as a distribution point for unwanted American military supplies and for shipments under a new plan with a simple name that will bend the arc of the country, the European Recovery Program. Someone writes Marshall Hilfer on the side of a crate in a pencil that does not smudge. Flour, canned milk, corrugated roofing, nails, machine tools. In Carl's city office, the language of distribution changes. It becomes about projects, about cement, about steel allotments for rebuilding a bridge over the Elster River. He sits in meetings about budgets and learns a new word, priority, as if everything could be measured on a single axis. The mathematics of rebuilding is multiplication. One hammer becomes many, one roof becomes weak protection for 10 people, and then 20. One factory that runs at a third of capacity can run at half, and then 3/4. The numbers demand peace to grow. The numbers demand silence to go down easy. The year 1948 is the hinge. On 20 June in the Western zones, currency reform arrives like a thunderclap and a parade with no music. The Deutsche Mark is introduced, quietly at first, and then with the force of human nature. Not many weeks after the new notes, blue and fragile, appear, shop windows that were empty become full. Goods come out of storerooms like animals from a winter den. Prices are liberally set. The black market doesn't vanish, it changes scale. We change currency because we could not change ourselves, Carl writes in his notebook on the 21st, copying the thought he wishes he had had 3 years earlier. It is a dangerous sentence. It is accurate and unfair at the same time. It is a thing he says only to paper. In the East, the Soviets introduced their own reform. In Berlin, the city is divided along supply lines that are concrete and sky. The blockade begins. The airlift begins. The airlift begins. Children watch candy fall from parachutes made of handkerchiefs onto Tempelhof and pick them up with the careful greed of war. In Leipzig, the drama is elsewhere. But the politics are here. The Cold War is not a metaphor. It is a budget line. It is a list of names. It is a set of personnel decisions. The East Germans will later call themselves the German Democratic Republic. The West will call itself the Federal Republic. Carl will call both by their acronyms in conversation, because the long names taste like politics. With the new money comes a new job title. He is transferred to the department that coordinates building permits for small factories. His task is to take in files, check that the petitioners are not on lists, check that their suppliers exist, check that they are not enemies of the new order. It is boring in the way that makes survival possible. He hates it for reasons he does not fully understand. He hates the fluorescent light and the way men in better suits lean on his desk. He hates the way he becomes gatekeeper to people he thinks are honorable and to others he thinks are not. He hates that he has become necessary because everyone else around him also has. He hates the office the way a man later will hate a train. He must ride to bring his child to school and therefore must love. He eats, he sleeps, he measures, he stamps, and he learns that democracies are built from stamps. The year 1949 births a republic in the West and a strand of rules in the East. Bonn becomes a capital because it is small and far from memory. Berlin becomes a symbol because it is close to it. Konrad Adenauer is chancellor. Carl recognizes something about him he cannot name, a mixture of sharpness and waiting. The new legislature passes laws that sound apologetic and pragmatic at the same time. The 31er Gesetz at the same time. The 31er Gesetz, the so-called Article 31 law, allows former civil servants who were removed during denazification to return to posts. It is justified as justice for common men. It is also a bargain with expertise. The hospitals need surgeons. The schools need principals. The ministries need men who can do algebra with human lives. The mathematics of public service demands continuity. The arithmetic of guilt is again refigured. In quiet, men and women return to desks. Chairs behind counters are occupied by those who have learned not to give speeches. Karl attends a training in administrative law in Bonn in 1950. He eats in a canteen that serves meat twice a week. On the train back through Kassel, he sees new factories with windows already dirty from work. Marshall Plan shipments have been turned into machines and then into noise and then into output. Wastewater flows into the Fulda. An occupation report notes that year with satisfaction, as if the smell is evidence of democracy. It is. The economy grows because it is allowed to, because men and women are paid by the piece again, because credit is extended and debts forgiven, because standards are made and enforced, because the currency can be exchanged for things that are not cigarettes, because fear has shifted from hunger to political disturbance. At home in Leipzig, a different state issues new textbooks. In the western cities where Karl travels, schoolbooks are revised a second time to suit a different frame. The Nazi period in the early editions is described in a few careful pages. There are pictures of ruins and of women clearing them. There are timelines that begin with 1933 and end with 1945, as if the years on either side were not their parents. In the mid-1950s, those pages grow more diplomatic. They emphasize resistance in general terms. They emphasize the suffering of bombings. They emphasize expulsion. They do not always emphasize perpetrators. They do not often say Jewish. They say people. They do not connect the names of the streets now being rebuilt with the names of the factories that made. The past becomes curriculum and then becomes a holiday. Commemorations multiply. Plaques are erected to the destroyed synagogue after it has become a school. Speeches are made about the danger of ideology in general. Karl's nieces recite poems about hope. He applauds and goes back to his office and stamps. When he walks at night, he knows where the DP camp used to be. It is different now. The families moved to Israel, to America, to other places whose names are now ordinary in the news. The gate is gone. A new fence encloses an allotment garden. The name stays trapped between his teeth. He has read a pamphlet about the Jewish question, written by a clergyman in his city. It is careful. It tries sincerity like a new coat. He thinks of a man he saw in 1945 with a striped cap and hands so steady that he could square a crate of pencils in one motion. He never learned his name. He never asked. This is perhaps his real sentence, never to learn the name of the person he should have known. The mathematics of contact failed long before the arithmetic of war, and after it did not improve. It changed variables. The early amnesty laws pass and pass again. The newspapers call them integration measures. The courts release prisoners who are old and too many. The prison cells fill with different faces. A man who in 1942 wrote a pamphlet praising the Führer now writes a column about the importance of coal production. He writes well, as he always did. He writes without adjectives like blood. He writes without adjectives like unity. He will be invited to an anniversary dinner in 1955. He will sit at a table with men who condemned him and laugh. He will pay the bill and submit the receipt for reimbursement to the ministry. The arithmetic of compromise is long division, repeated until the remainder is small enough to ignore. Expellee associations form with names filled with longing, Landsmannschaften der Schlesier, der Sudetendeutschen. They organize yearly gatherings and publish newsletters that contain maps of the old towns, menus from old restaurants, photographs of old schoolyards. They are right to mourn. They are wrong to narrate the story as if it had no beginning, only rupture. They are important voters. The Chancellor attends their events. He speaks a language of belonging that allows the state to exist between memory and election. He promises to never forget. He cannot promise to return anything. The mathematics of democracy must account for people who lost everything and for those who took rooms from them, unwillingly and then willingly over time. It must also account for those who have no association, whose loss cannot be organized. He sometimes listens, at night, to a small radio, the one hidden behind a bookstand during the last months of the war. The voices are different now. They are not exhortations. They are information. In 1953, he hears about an uprising in the East, in Berlin. Workers against quotas, soldiers against quotas. The commentary is clipped, almost British. The streets are European again. He stands and looks out his window at Leipzig and thinks of loans and labor and the memory of 1933. He thinks in numbers. If the average wage goes up by a certain amount, if the price of bread goes down by a certain amount, if the peace holds, then we will be safe. It is not strange that he thinks this way. It is trained into him by the arithmetic of survival. His brother Hans returns in 1955. A Heimkehrer. A long closed door opens. He is thin in a way that suggests his bones have more to say than words. He has photographs of a camp in the Urals that has a name that struggles to be pronounced in German. He does not talk much about the years. He talks about a tree that grew crooked outside the barracks. He talks about a man who taught him a song in Russian. He has opinions about soup. He laughs at small jokes. He does not laugh at big ones. The state films the return and shows 10,000 men stepping off trains as leaflets float down celebrating the honor of their endurance. The arithmetic of vengeance has mutated into the arithmetic of homeland. Karl watches the newsreel and thinks, "We are learning to count forward." At work, he is promoted to a supervisory role. His desk is slightly larger. His stamp is heavier. A young woman in the office uses a new machine that can copy a single document to many in minutes by pressing a crank. The room smells of solvent and purpose. He spends afternoons reviewing files with attached statements from the Sprüchkammer, annotations in pencil. Category 4, reinstated. Category Fee, exonerated. Category 2, barred but currently employed as consultant. He sees a familiar surname and remembers a line in a wartime bulletin. He sees a new surname and recognizes a face from a rally he denies to himself that he attended. He approves a permit for a new factory that will make kitchen stoves. He knows the owner was an enthusiastic National Socialist. He also knows the owner gave a girl a job in 1946 who otherwise might have starved. Both are true. He learns to live with both because the numbers require it. The Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle, is a reporting phenomenon and a real one. Growth exceeds predictions. By 1958, there are cars on streets where children once gathered coal dust. Storefronts glow. The faces of men on the factory floor are younger. The newspapers use words like confidence. Foreigners are invited to work because the arithmetic of labor demands more hands than available. Italians, then Spaniards, then Greeks, and soon after Turks. The country that expelled brings in. The mathematics of population heals and reopens wounds. At dinner, an expellee says that the lodger in the next room cooks with too much garlic. The room goes quiet. The young woman at the table says, "He makes good music in the evening." Everyone eats potatoes and returns to talking about football. The arithmetic of enemies changes year by year until it has a different denominator altogether. There are ceremonies, memorials for the dead of air raids, bells toll, lists of names, a new cross on an old mound. There are other memorials too, small ones placed by quiet men and women with folded maps, stones at former synagogues, plaques near factories where people were taken. They are often ignored by city planning. They are sometimes defaced. They are sometimes cleaned with care by boys given a chore they will remember as an order from no one. There is a shift in the late 1950s among some teachers, a more honest lesson plan here and there. It will take another generation to make the lessons sharper. For now, the official memory is organized around survival. The unofficial memory is kept in boxes under floors. He meets a woman who tells him that her father had been an SS man and that he died in 1943 in a car accident, and that his death saved her family from shame. She says this without any visible emotion, like a piece of data on a chart. He thinks about curves. He thinks about inflection points. He thinks about a life spent ensuring that numbers on paper correspond to bricks and people. He understands now that his work is not an abstraction. It is the distribution of the possible. He hates this thought as if it were a uniform. In 1961, a wall is built in Berlin. The mathematics of the Cold War becomes architecture. In the West, the event confirms the national story. We were victims of ideology twice, and now are guardians of markets and morals. In the East, the event confirms a different national story. We will build our own modernity without them. In Leipzig, minute adjustments to the rules are made. The office mills on. He stamps and watches a young man in the corner draw a caricature of a politician in the margins of a form. He does not reprimand him. He does not encourage him. He stamps. He remembers the notebooks under the floorboard and wonders if the paper has rotted. He goes to a school pageant in 1963 and hears a boy recite a poem about the ruins being a stern teacher. He watches the parents in the audience nod in agreement. He watches a teacher smile at the line about hope. He watches the back row of men who come to everything like this because they must, and he sees an old SA pin on a lapel altered into a tie tack. He closes his eyes and opens them again. He knows that a democracy built by men who were once in a dictatorship is a contradiction turned into a residency permit. He knows it is also the only possible fact. The math of it is relentless. For a nation to function, a certain percentage of those who profited from the previous regime must be integrated, monitored, forgiven, sidelined, and then allowed to age and die. He does not attend church often. But once, in 1964, on a Sunday when the rain makes the streets disappear into the air, he sits and listens to Pastor Koch read a passage about confession. The pastor has grown older. His hair is white and approximate. He reads slowly. The truth will set you free. Carl's mind translates it into his native language of numbers. Let X equal truth. Let Y equal freedom. The function is not linear. There are thresholds beyond which X increases dramatically, but Y does not. There are segments where small increases in X cause large jumps in Y for some and small for others. There is the real possibility that the truth, fully told, will not free those who most need it, but bind them to a past they cannot escape. He shakes his head and stands and departs before the congregation has processed to the door. A young co-worker asks him months later if he ever thinks about 1933. He answers, every day, and then laughs to make it a joke. In his office, he reviews a file that covers 20 years in 10 pages. He writes a recommendation for a man whose politics he does not admire, but whose factory employs 200. He writes a demotion for a man who is smaller and more earnest, but who has falsified 3 invoices. He spreads his guilt thin over acts that feel administrative. He wonders if the clerk at the Spruchkammer in 1946 thought the same way about him. After hours, he sometimes walks to the library and reads. He reads a novel about a man who moves through history as if it were weather. He reads a pamphlet written by a survivor whose tone is clinical and whose evidence drips like acid. He reads an Allied report from 1947. He finds bound in a crude volume in the reading room. Attitudes remain ambivalent, it says. No general purge can be accomplished without undermining civil society. He copies this line into his notebook and underlines civil society twice. He knows that is a polite way of saying that justice and order rarely coexist in the same postcode. He wishes, sometimes, that he had been a